Hello. I wanted to jump on TikTok and tell my birth story because I love hearing women's birth stories, and I've now had my third really positive experience, and I think it's important that we talk about positive births to empower mums to be and to remind them that we've been birthing forever and that it's not something to be inherently afraid of. So I'm going to tell my positive breech vaginal birth story. So where to begin? I'll just start with prefacing that I am a midwife myself in Australia, and I am obsessed with birth. I'm obsessed with every aspect of birth, and place really, really high importance on antenatal education so that women can have empowered experiences, regardless of mode of birth. Well, what I wanted for myself was normal vaginal births with as much mobility as possible, and I wanted to avoid opioids. Both of my previous births were in 2022 and 2023, and they were both very precipitous. The first was an hour and a half, start to finish, and the second was 30 minutes. I was very aware of the intensity, and throughout my pregnancy, there were definitely windows of anxiety where I was like, I know what's to come, and that's confronting, but also empowering because I've done it twice before, I can do it again. From conception, I knew that free birthing wasn't the right option for this baby for whatever reason. We live very rurally, so we have limited maternity options. So my options were either get in the car and try and make it to my local hospital, which is a little over an hour away. So I knew that I wanted a water birth, and I knew that I didn't need a doctor, but I wanted a midwife to support me through this labour and birth. I started to birth in Tamworth, where I actually used to work, and have some good girlfriends down here. It's about 2 hours from our farm, so I booked an Airbnb from 38 weeks with the intention to wait until this baby was born. Pregnancy-wise, it was a really nice low-risk pregnancy, but I was so deeply uncomfortable from like 34 weeks on. I had really significant pelvic pain, particularly at the end of the day, where I felt like I couldn't walk, I couldn't move. Do you want more booby? It's a couple of days later now, we're at home and I'm sitting here with this little tacker. But yeah, where was I? So once we got to Tamworth, I went to 2 obstetric appointments, one at 39 weeks, one at 40. And at both of those appointments, they were super quick, but we did a quick palp and baby was head down, cephalic. I communicated that I didn't want to discuss induction and that I felt like it wasn't too far off. At the 40-week appointment, which was at 40 and 0, I requested a vaginal examination to see whether I was somewhat favourable, and then I would decide whether or not I wanted a stretch and sweep. But I didn't tolerate the VE. I was in too much pain, so I told her to stop. But my cervix was very posterior, and she said that she could maybe admit one finger. So that just goes to show that VEs mean nothing, because I had a baby 2 days later. Because my other labours were quite quick, I felt really anxious about it starting in the middle of the night and me waking flustered and in labour and having to wake my husband. That's really not what I wanted this time. So this time I tried to manifest a daytime labour, and that was what happened, which is so beautiful. So at 40 and 2, I had a slow morning. I was very emotional that morning. I had a big cry because my other 2 babies had been born by that gestation. So I was like, I'm so pregnant and I'm so over it. Had a big cry to my mum, and then I hit up my girlfriend and was like, I'm coming over the Savo with the fam to distract myself. So we organised to have a barbecue dinner at her place. I went to the shops at around midday to get some meat for the barbecue, And while I was walking around the shops, I started to get some cramping, but that's not abnormal for me. I get really intense Braxton Hicks. But what made these different were they had pressure with them, like in my bottom. And I was aware of it. It felt like gastric cramping. I thought maybe I could do a poo, but I don't know. So I waddled home, and then it got to about 2:30, which is when we were going to leave to my girlfriend's place. And I was getting these cramps that felt somewhat rhythmic, but not rhythmic enough to time yet. They were probably 1 in 20. But again, knowing how quickly I labour last time, I did give her the heads up. I was like, I'm getting a bit of cramping. I'm just going to stay at home for another hour, and if they don't regulate or they peter out, I'll come over. Stayed at home for another hour, and they continued like 1 in 20, but considerable pressure with each one. So I made the decision to not go to her house. And then this absolute wave of anxiety came over me because I was like, oh shit, I've got to do it again. Had a big cry to my mum and to my husband. I was like, I don't want to do it. And they were like, you can do it. It's all right. This is what you wanted. I'm like, I know, but still. Then I filmed this video. Okay, so I'm 40 and 2, and it's 3:15. Oh, I'm getting a tightening. Okay. Yeah, I'm 40 and 2, and I'm getting some pains, and have a really quick labours. I feel a bit shaky and nauseous. My heart's beating really fast, so I've just sent my mum out of the house with my kids, and I'm gonna have a quick shower. I feel really anxious. Then I had the world's quickest shower because I didn't want to get comfortable anywhere and then trick my body into transitioning and actually going into established labour. So I had this quick shower and got out and quickly got dressed and put the TENS on, which was also a hard decision because the TENS I ordered only came with 1 pack of electrodes. So I was like, this better be it. I put the TENS on and started it on a very low setting. And mum had taken the kids out of the house, so it was just me and Jay was annoying me a bit. Like, he kept coming, trying to be like, do you want water and stuff? And I was like, fuck off. So he pissed off into another room. I decided to lie down for an hour and see what my tightenings did if I did that. And also I was feeling tired, so I lay down and they stopped completely for that hour. Something clicked in my mind. I was like, girl, you don't want to be pregnant forever, and you also don't want to wake up in the night and have this baby. Like, that's not what you want. So I went up to Jay and I said, let's just go and walk around the block once and see if that does anything. We set out around the block probably would have been 4:30 on a very slow walk, and I had my TENS on. I actually turned the TENS off because I wasn't getting any contractions at all, and we were just walking and talking, and then we were probably like 20 minutes into our walk when I got this almighty contraction that had me, like, Jay was probably 20 meters in front of me and I was like, come here. He came back and I was like moving my hips around, trying not to vocalize too much because it was like there were kids everywhere. And but I was like wanting to get down on the road on hands and knees, and the pressure in my bum was insane. It felt like my waters could have broken. And having had 2 other babies, I was like, this kid is in my asshole. So once that finished, I was like, right, we need to get home. And we quickly waddled home, and I was so anxious that I was going to get another one and my waters were going to go. And like, anyway, that didn't happen. we did get home, and then by that time Mum had gotten home with the kids. The tightenings at this point were probably about 1 in 10. I wasn't timing them because I didn't want to know, because seeing them regulate would have made me more anxious. When they would come, they were quite intense. I was leaning over the back of the couch, definitely not being able to talk through the contractions, and boosting the tens, and like they were toe curling. So I had a few more of them, and then I made the decision to go up to birth suite, because I figured what was going to happen is once I was in my birth space that I would transition very quickly. The hospital was only 6 minutes from our Airbnb, which was so nice. And I said goodbye to my mum, and Mum's midwife, and she's like, "You can do it, honey. It's all right." Like, everything I needed to hear. And I said goodbye to my kids, like the world's quickest kisses, because I was like, I need to get out of here. And then got in the car, and I called the hospital while I was in the car. And the midwife that answered is an ex-colleague, and she's just so experienced and so woman-centered and very no bullshit, and that's what I needed. And I was like, "Sharon, I'm in labour." She's like, "Yep, I've got a birth suite for you, I'll see you soon." And the drive there and the walk up to the hospital didn't get any tightenings. And then once we walked through the door, I saw Sharon. I was like, "I don't want to do this." And she's like, "You can do it." I had a very stern birth plan. If anyone's interested in it, I'm happy to do a video on it. It's all my personal opinions, but yes, I had a very stern birth plan that essentially was like, you can give me recommendations, but I'm likely going to decline everything. As an experienced birther and also as a midwife, I got into the birth suite. I gave Sharon my birth plan, and straight away she started setting up the room. Lights were dimmed, curtains were drawn. We put on my meditation, which was just the Freya app. I've used that for all my babies and rate it so highly. So I was standing next to the bed, and Sharon set up the gas for me, and we pumped it right up. And this is the first labour where I've been able to use the gas and actually get a good effect from it. And God, it was good. It was so good. Definitely didn't take away any of the pain, but it helped me so much regulate my breathing. And I felt great in between because I was high from the gas. So that was really nice. So a contraction would start, and I would like sway and dance around the bed. Like my body was just trying to move as much as it could. And I had my Freya app on, and I had the gas, and it was lovely. It was really nice. As soon as we got into birth suite, I transitioned very quickly. I was crying a lot. The pressure was so intense, and the contractions instantly picked up. So they regulated really quickly once I was in that birth space. And we did a fetal heart, and we found baby like towards the front on the right hand side, right down near my pelvis. So with that, I was like, yeah, well, let's head down. And also that's what I thought throughout the pregnancy as well. Sharon filled the pool for me, and she's like, "The bath's ready whenever you want to get in." But I wanted to leave it kind of as late as possible so that I wasn't getting in before I felt ready. So the bath was sitting there ready. Decided to get in the bath probably at about, I'd say it would be maybe 6:30. He was born at 7:10. So got to hospital at 6, got in the bath at 6:30. He was born at 7:10. So I got in the pool, and that was really nice. I've wanted a water birth forever, and I've witnessed so many beautiful water births. So I was so excited that it was my turn. So I got in the pool, I had the gas, again I had my Freya app going, and my husband took these photos. I was very mobile during this labour, and was instinctually going from my side to my front to my back to hands and knees. And between contractions I was very lucid, and I was saying to Sharon, "I don't know what position this baby's in." Not questioning if it was breech, but I did think maybe it was posterior and swinging, because the pain was changing from my left to my right side. And Sharon was so beautiful. She's like, you know what to do. Your body knows what to do. Just go with it. You're doing great. There was never any fear. It was just so lovely. And then probably at about 7, I'd say, I was getting a bit fed up because I had all of this anal pressure, like insane anal pressure that I normally only get right before I crown. But I was putting my finger up inside me and I could feel the presenting part was still up around -1. And like anyone that's felt a breech, it feels like a head because the bum is so tightly applied in there. So I didn't think anything of it, but I could feel the baby. And I was like, I'm just gonna do like a big push with my next contraction and hope that that brings the presenting part down enough to trigger the fetal ejection reflex. So I did that with the next contraction, and it was so painful to push before my body was ready. So I feel for all the women that are told to push at 10 centimeters and not when their body starts doing it. But it did work. The presenting part came right down, and then with the next contraction, I was getting that overwhelming urge to push. So I pushed a couple of times and felt like that overwhelming pressure intensifying, and I started to feel the ring of fire, which was definitely lessened in the bath. Like, it was still so intense, but comparing it to my land births, it was so much easier. And this is when Jay filmed this video. So essentially what had happened is I was pushing, crowning, when really I was rumping, which is the breech version of that. But because it was such a beautiful hands-off birth, and because I'd said to Sharon that I don't want anyone touching me unless I ask for it, she was so respectful of my space. But you could see her in that video watching with the torch, and then finally what she saw was a hand had come down on the presenting part. So it was a bum with a hand over it. So she saw the hand and thought, oh, it's a compound presentation, as in compound over the head, which can happen quite regularly. That would explain all of the pain she was getting while she was in labour. And then she saw a bum hole. But because breech is majorly pathologised in Australia, she was also very aware of protecting my space in that moment, and she knew that nothing was going to make me get out of that water. I just want to preface and say that there was a very flawed breech trial done in the early 2000s, which essentially stopped vaginal breech births in Australia. And now there are some very skilled midwives and obstetricians who are working very hard to change that narrative. And I have been to breech courses external to my training as a midwife, and I am not afraid of breech. And had I have known that this was a breech baby, I still would have attempted a vaginal breech birth. So when Sharon told me that my baby was breech, there was zero fear, because the baby was half born, and also I had that prior knowledge to know that this is not an emergency situation. And luckily Sharon is very educated as well and not fear-based, and she was also not fearful in that moment. Anyway, so with the next contraction, I pushed, my body pushed, and this little fella was born into the water, and it was just such a beautiful moment. You can see me dunk him a couple of times. And the reason Sharon didn't intervene is because I'd said in my birth plan that I didn't want anyone else to touch my baby. I didn't want tactile stimulation. Anyway, he was fine. And that was such a beautiful moment, because once he cried on my chest, I felt his little scrotum and I was like, he's a boy. Love the surprise births. They're so special. After he was born, I probably spent about 5 minutes in the pool, which was lovely. And then I had a big separation bleed. And he was crying, but he was quite tachypneic, where they breathe really fast. So Sharon said to me, would you feel comfortable moving to the bed? And I said yes. In my birth plan, I had a clause about a neonatal resuscitation and how I wanted that done. And I had said that I want the resus to be done on my chest with the cord intact. So Sharon and my other midwife, Michaela, were really respectful of that. We moved me to the bed and they moved the bed to the resuscitator, and all they needed to do with Clancy was just give him a few breaths with the mask to help him inflate his lungs and do a bit of bilateral suction. So that was, quick and easy. A paediatrician did come in with my consent, had a quick look at him and wasn't concerned. Because his cord was still attached, he was saturating really well. So yeah, the cord intact served its purpose in that moment. I have to look at my paperwork. Probably about 15 minutes, the cord had pretty much stopped pulsating, so I was happy for them to cut and clamp. And I get really gnarly afterbirth pains. So as much as I wanted an unmedicated labour, for the afterbirth pains, give me everything. I was like, please get me some endone. So they went and got that for me. And I birthed the placenta on the bed with a bit of cord traction. And it came straight out. It was big. It felt like I was birthing another baby. That was so rude. I had my endone, and Sharon also gave me some morphine, and so I was on cloud 9, feeling great, skin to skin with my baby. And after the fact, we were all sitting there, me, Sharon, Jay and Michaela, and we're like, oh my god, what a wild birth, a breech water birth. Love that. I then had a really beautiful 3-night postnatal stay, not because I needed any medical care, but to avoid my toddlers and just spend time establishing breastfeeding and bonding with this baby. And it was just such an incredibly special time that I will think about for the rest of my life. This birth was so incredibly empowering for me. And the main difference was that even though my other births were really empowering and this one was just as painful, I never felt like it was bigger than me. I felt like it was just pain and something that was going to be short-lived and that I would get through, and that mindset saved me and saved my experience. I also feel really proud of myself for listening to my intuition about where was right for me to birth and with what people, because I do think if that situation had have happened elsewhere, that my environment wouldn't have been as well protected. And I feel so blessed that I was surrounded by the people that I was surrounded by and supported by. The main takeaways are a really good birth plan that are true to your wishes, because you carry your birth for the rest of your life. Stuff what everyone else thinks. Take your time, do your research, educate yourself, and make decisions that are right for you. I don't feel like we're done having babies, and this experience has just made me excited for the next.